Gonna make it happen today. Although I'm gonna warn you now, this is another video featuring
the swatch of horrors, the frogging.
Sometimes, despite all our best efforts as a knitter, there's going to be a mistake. And it's a mistake that you can't just fix with a crochet hook. And you need to rip out rows of knitting to get back to it. So it's called frogging because you rip it, rip it, rip it, get it, get it, get it. Frogging back can be really stressful because we're basically taking our nice secured stitches sitting on a needle, taking them off. And when that happens, it's very possible to drop more stitches and for the work to unravel more than we would want. It can be very, very scary, but it's okay. Just like in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the first rule of knitting is don't panic. There are things that we can do that makes the frogging process much safer. So hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, give this video a thumbs up, and let's find out how we can frog back our work without completely unraveling. Quick reminder, as always, down in the description box, you will find timestamps to different parts of the video. So if there's a piece of information you want to get to quickly, you can. Also down in the description box, you will find a list of materials and resources that I think are helpful for today's video. Some of these will have clearly marked affiliate links. If you use one of my affiliate links, it'll take you to a website where you can do some shopping. If you make a purchase, I might earn a small commission, and this really does help support my channel. It helps me buy supplies for review, materials for demonstration, upgrade equipment, all those good things. So if you utilize one of my affiliate links, thank you so much. It is so greatly appreciated. And if not, I completely understand. I'm really just glad you're here watching a video today. So there's some old saws that you sometimes hear, like, you know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, a stitch in time saves 9. Well, in knitting, a lifeline can be really, really helpful when it comes to frogging back. I know it's not very pithy, it doesn't rhyme, it's not gonna become an old saw. A lifeline is just a bit of thread that is inserted through a row of stitches. And it acts basically as a stitch holder if you have to take your stitches off the needle and frog back. You can frog back to where that lifeline is and all those stitches will be secured on that thread. So a lifeline is really a preventative measure in case you have to frog. But lifelines are actually really useful also as a way to track your progress when you're knitting, because usually with a lifeline, you want to place one every like 10, 20 rows, or if you're doing a stitch repeat, you can place a lifeline after every pattern repeat, so that way you are able to easily track your rows without having to use a row counter. So what you want to use for a lifeline kind of depends. I personally like to use just like size 10 or 20 crochet thread. This is cotton, so it can easily slip in and out of stitches, and it's thin, and almost any knitting situation type of yarn, this is going to work very well for me. A lot of people also like to use dental floss. If you can find it, unwaxed, unflavored dental floss is ideal. I personally don't like using dental floss because I usually can't find it other than waxed, and I don't like using waxed thread in my knitting, but hey, everyone's mileage can vary on that. How you put in a lifeline kind of depends on your needle situation. So here I have this swatch.
The swatch of horrors.
And I worked it on a fixed circular. So to insert a lifeline into stitches that are on a needle, like a fixed circular or straight, I think the easiest way to do it is kind of like after I finished a row. So here I am, and I would just need a tapestry needle and my crochet thread. And I just thread my tapestry needle, and I run that tapestry needle through the stitches thusly. As I run it through, I want to make sure I don't accidentally split my fibers. This is one of the nice things too about working with circular needles. and inserting lifelines is because my stitches can just sit on the cable for the circular needle. I have plenty of room to insert my tapestry needle into the stitches cleanly, but you can do this as well with a straight needle. All right, so one thing I want to make sure is that I spread my stitches out across, because I want to make sure my lifeline is long enough that it doesn't accidentally slip out. And then I just snip, and boom, I now have a lifeline into my work. And then you work your next row. The one thing you have to be careful though is when you work that next row is making sure that when you insert your needle into the stitch, you don't also knit through the thread. You want to just knit through your actual stitch. If you are working with interchangeable needles, you can insert a lifeline as you knit a row. For interchangeable needles that use a screw system like this cable, if you look closely, you'll see that there is a hole right there. That hole is actually to insert what's called a key that helps you tighten the cable onto your needle. But you can insert thread into that hole normally, and then as you knit, the stitches will run over the lifeline and the lifeline will get threaded through your stitches automatically. So it's a really easy way to insert a lifeline using interchangeable needles. Now, Addy needles, which have a click system, doesn't have holes like this on the connector for their interchangeable cables. But what they now have are what they call their SOS cables. The SOS cable has a slit in it right here that you can open up and put thread through. And again, as you knit, the stitches will run over the lifeline and the thread will get put through the stitches automatically, so you don't have to do anything after you finish a row. It's a really nice way to be able to insert a lifeline. So do I always use lifelines when I'm working? No, I don't. A lot of times I don't use lifelines. I most often will use a lifeline when I'm working a project that maybe has a complicated stitch pattern where frogging back the work and then trying to get my stitches back up on the needle would be very difficult to do without having some secured stitches. So lace knitting is when I am most likely going to utilize lifelines. But what if I have decided not to do a lifeline, but then I need to frog back and I think, you know what? I kind of wish I had put a lifeline in. Well, you can in fact insert a lifeline into your knitting after the fact. Right here, I have a mistake and I want to fix this. So I'm going to thread my tapestry needle and I can thread through a row. So I'm going to thread through this row right here. And I'm going to thread through here because I have a pretty good idea, like this row is fine. And I'm going to basically be putting in a lifeline below where I think the mistake is. That is one thing with inserting a lifeline after the fact, is a lot of times I want to insert that lifeline in a clean row that's below the mistake. And I might lose a little bit of extra work, but it's kind of worth the effort just to make sure I have all my stitches on cleanly. Now here I am working stockinette, which means I can clearly see each leg of my stitch. So I can easily put my tapestry needle behind the left leg of each stitch and thread the stitches onto a lifeline that way. And basically I'm just bringing my tapestry needle behind every other leg that I see along the same row. However, sometimes the legs aren't so easy to see, in which case you can look to the purl bumps. And the purl bumps are always going to be this bump right here that makes the little rainbow, okay? And this is one thing in knitting that's really important that you develop, is an ability to distinguish where your purl bumps are of your stitches, where the legs are of your stitches. This is called reading your work, and it's an important skill in knitting. So I have the purl bump side of the fabric facing me, and I'm going to bring my tapestry needle up underneath the purl bump.
thusly. Not through the pearl bump yarn, but underneath that pearl bump. Then I'll bring my needle to the pearl bump next to it and bring it up under in the same direction. It's really important as I do this that I bring my tapestry needle up underneath the pearl bump in the same direction each time. Once you have a good feel for what you're doing, you can start inserting your tapestry needle up through each pearl bump before pulling all your thread through, just to make the process go by a little bit faster.
And if I have done this correctly, I should be able to take my stitches off the needle, frog them back down to that row, and all my stitches be secure. So let's see if I did it right.
So now it's just time to rip it, rip it, rip it.
Oh, there it is. All my stitches are nice and secure on this. I can't even ravel past it. Now that I'm here at this point, I can then just get my stitches back up on my needle without any problem because all my stitches are nice and secure on that lifeline. I've got all my stitches back up on my needle and it's secure. And at this point, I would have a choice. I can leave this lifeline in the work in case I have to frog back again. However, my working yarn has gotten a little tangled up in the thread. So I'm gonna go ahead and just pull that thread out. And this is why you want to use like a cotton thread or floss because it will easily pull out of your work. So that's out. So yeah, that is how you can insert a lifeline after the fact. So most of the time I don't use lifelines, either as a forethought or as an afterthought. Most of the time when I'm frogging back, I am throwing caution to the wind. I'm just taking my stitches off the needle and like going for broke and rip it out till I get to the mistake. But I'm not completely foolhardy. There's a way of going about frogging back like I just described that makes it a little more safe. The first way of doing it is to do what I like to call as frog and then tink back. So what does that mean? That means on this swatch, you can see right here, I missed a stitch. I didn't work that yarn. For whatever reason, I decided the best course of action is to go ahead and frog back and pretty much redo this swatch because this is a swatch
Of horrors.
The joke does not get old, okay? It does not get old. So, how am I gonna do that? How am I gonna do this safely? Well, I'm going to frog down to one row above the mistake. All right, I'm gonna frog all the way back to that one row. Then I will tink back that last row till I get to my mistake, because tinking back is much safer than it is frogging back. I'm gonna mark the row that I wanna tink back to. So here's this thread. This is the mistake right here. So this is the row above it, right, where I made the mistake. So I'm going to put my stitch marker right here on this row. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not quite sure where I'm marking it, if this is the beginning or the end of the row. So I'm gonna mark both sides just to be safe. So wherever I end up first is where I'm gonna start tinking back. All right, guys, it's time to do it. We're throwing caution to the wind now, and we're gonna just take the stitches off the needle. No lifelines, no nothing. Bum, bum, bum. Ah, I have live stitches! Okay, again, don't panic. We're not gonna panic. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be totally fine. I'm just frog. No, I don't usually go frog the entire time, do it. All right, I'm getting close to the row. Then I'm gonna tink back. Oh, here we are. Okay, so this is the row right here where I'm gonna tink back. And I have a whole mess of yarn. I'm just gonna put this to the side. I'm gonna be honest. You're frogging back as much as I just did. It's usually a good idea to be very careful with your yarn management. Maybe even grab like a Nosta pin or a stick and wind your loose working yarn around it so it doesn't become a tangly mess as you frog back. But I threw caution to the wind. So I'm going to tink back now. Here's my needle. And with just my live stitches here, I'm going to just insert my needle and tink back. one at a time. I'm not even getting the stitches back on the needle to do this tinking back. I'm just putting my needle in and pulling the yarn out. It can be time consuming doing it this way, especially if you're working with a project that has like hundreds of stitches. But again, if I was working a project that had lots and lots of stitches, like hundreds, thousands of stitches, I'd start leaning towards using lifelines. Now I've gotten all my stitches back up on the needle and I can tink back to where the mistake is. I've gotten back to my mistake. So now my stitches are up on my needle, I'm back to my mistake, and now that all that is done, I can go ahead and I can start knitting again. Sometimes when I take my stitches off the needle and I frog back, I am really foolhardy. And I rip right back to where the mistake was. I rip out the row where the mistake was, and I'm going to just put my stitches back up on my needle and start knitting and not do any tinking back. This is a situation where you're most likely to drop stitches and potentially could make things worse. But I'm really confident about going with this method because I got some tricks up my sleeve. Number one trick is to use a longer, thinner needle than your project needle to get your live stitches back up. The thing is, when you have live stitches off of the needle, right, you just want to get them back up on any needle as quickly as you can. And the thing is, if I try to pick up these stitches with my regular needle, at first it's going to be okay. But as I pick up each stitch, I might start pulling yarn out of the stitch next to it. And it usually starts happening really bad about, like, I find a third to a halfway through picking up stitch. Oh, it started to happen there. Try to put the stitch through and I just dropped it. It's always better to prevent the drop stitch. This smaller needle is going to fit through those stitches much easier and much faster than your project needle because there's so much more space in the stitch for that. Oops, I have a little drop stitch there. All right, I'm gonna just mark that. I'm not gonna try to repair it right now. I'm just gonna put a stitch marker where that drop stitch is so that when I come back to work that row, I know to fix it. Right now, my goal is just to get the stitches back up on the needle and secure. Because once they're on the needle, I don't have to worry about anything raveling on further. Now that all my stitches are back up on the needle, do I need to transfer all of them to my project needle before I start working my next row or round? No. The stitch that you wrap your yarn around, which for most of us is the right needle, is the needle that sizes your new stitches. So you can have a smaller needle in your left hand and create your next row with the needle in your right hand, and it's not going to affect any of your tensioning. So you just take your project needle and start working my next row. And this won't affect the size of my old stitches, and my new stitches will be perfectly fine. Here's where I had that mistake, so I'm gonna just go ahead and fix that now. So boom, that's done. And this is something else. When you are going to frog back, make sure you have a tin of stitch markers right there by you, because stitch markers are really gonna help you secure drop stitches and various things. And all of my stitches are now up on my project needle, all secure, and I've even worked another row. So yeah, if you are having to get live stitches back up on a needle, it is really useful to use a smaller, longer needle than your project needle to do that quickly and safely. So yeah, those are kind of like my top tips for how to deal with frogging back your work without completely unraveling. But I'd love to hear from you. What questions do you have about frogging back, about making corrections to your knitting? Do you have any tips or tricks for frogging back safely that I haven't shared today? Please let me know down in the comments below, because sharing knowledge back and forth is how we all get to learn together. And that is one of the great fun things about having an internet knitting community is that we all get to learn from one another. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. If so, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your other knitting friends. Liking videos, sharing videos, commenting on videos are all great ways to help support my channel and let YouTube know that this is a space worth checking out. If you have not already, please make sure that you subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if you'd like to go a little bit further in your support of my channel, you can always leave me a super thanks. Just like using my affiliate links, super thanks, or buying me a coffee helps me buy materials for demonstration, for review, upgrade equipment, and try to make this a great resource for you here on the YouTube. So if you utilize any of those support systems, thank you so much. It is so greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you have a wonderful day, evening, weekend, weeknight, whenever you may be watching this. And as always, happy health and happy making. Bye. Okay, let's get on to the good stuff. It's time for the good stuff. It's time for the good stuff. Sometimes, despite all our best efforts as a knitter, there's going to be a mistake. And it's a mistake that you can't just fix with a crochet hook and frogging back to, that's not the right word. Okay, try again. All right, so a stitch in time, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. A stitch in time saves 9. Can I say that? Apparently not. And yeah, oops. I almost just dropped a stitch. No frogging involved, just knitting. I almost dropped a stitch.